Listen up. We are back with another episode of the Construction Mentor Podcast. My name is Ike. I am your host. What are we here to do? We're here to promote the construction industry. We want to let all of the people out there know that the construction industry is the place to be. Why? Because the construction industry is one of the few industries that can't be taken by AI, that pays very well, that is merit-based, meaning that for every ounce of effort you put in, you're going to get a guaranteed return. And you can really create whatever kind of lifestyle you want for you. If you want to work from home, if you want a certain house, drive a certain car, whatever that looks like, the opportunities really are endless for you. If you're already in the industry, we want to give you the tools, we want to give you the mentorship, we want to give you the stories of success to help you take your career to the next level. So what other kind of tools do we have out there other than this podcast? If you go to constructionmentor.org, there's a few links there for you. If you go in the toolbox there are courses. Among those courses are HVAC courses, electrical courses, plumbing courses, drafting, estimating, and finally, my favorite, because I created it, the construction project management course. We want to be able to open doors for people to come into the industry. We want to do that in an affordable way, but in an impactful way to give you something to put on your resume, whether you have a college degree, no college degree, experience, or no experience. Those courses bring value to people and enable you to put something on your resume that can get you that first job. The biggest hurdle people have coming into this industry is that they just need to get that first job. They need to get their foot in the door. Just give me that opportunity to prove myself and what value I can bring to you, you being your potential employer. And then it all goes up from there with every ounce of effort that you put in, to get that reward, as we already mentioned. So go check that out. Again, that's constructionmentor.org. You can also get all of those courses, specifically the construction project management course, from my link in my bio, whether that's on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. So go check that out. There's free intro videos so that you can get a little bit more of a feel for what the industry is, what it means to be a construction project manager, a plumber, an HVAC technician, an electrician, what a day in the life is like, what it pays at each stage in your career, and specifically how to get started. I've actually had people say that they just from those free intro videos were able to tailor their resume and their existing experience to show an employer that they have, although it's not in construction, relevant enough experience just to get that first opportunity. So go check that out. Again, the goal there is to give people an opportunity for an affordable education and provide them with something that they can put on their resume. And resume help comes with all of those things as well. We want to help you guys write your resume and market yourself to potential employers. So what are we here to do today specifically? Now, if you're a first-time listener, oftentimes we will address specific topics. Other times we will have guests on where they share details about their life and their career and what they do in their trade or their specific role in the industry and how they've found success and what works and what doesn't work. So what I wanted to do today, I don't have a guest. This is obviously a solo. I want to take a quick 15, 20 minutes, and I just want to address one of the most common objections that I have in my posts, particularly when I compare trade jobs to jobs that people receive after getting a college education. And I have a post going viral right now where I compared what it is like to get a job and a starting salary from the Pope's alma mater, Villanova University, versus being a welder in the city of Philadelphia. And I would say, of the negative comments, 1 out of 3 negative comments is something along in the comment section. It's something along the lines of, well, yeah, you may make more money now, but you won't make more money later. And even if you do make more money later, it's going to cost you your long-term health and your longevity and your ability to live a long and happy life. Now, that's not true or not accurate for a few reasons, and I want to go through why. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that you can't get hurt in construction. I'm not saying that it doesn't take a toll on your body. What I am saying is that the perception that it will take a toll on your body and that you do have to give up longevity and long-term health and your knees and your back to find success in this industry is a false one. First of all, the first reason that jumps to mind is that even if it was dangerous and even if you did have to give up those things, the notion that there's no career growth within construction is false. The best estimators, project managers, project executives, and business owners come from the field. They come from that hands-on experience. They're able to run their projects and their businesses better for having that experience, and experience is the best education. So again, to say that there's no career growth, the first aspect, or the first part of that comment that I mentioned, was that, people with a college degree will make more money later. Well, the same goes for the trades. The better you are at your trade in the field, the more money you're going to make. There are welders, entry level, that are making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. But when they get really good at their craft and they're an ace, and they become a journeyman, and then they become a foreman, they can make $150,000, $200,000. That is 3 to 4 times what the average college graduate makes. So before you even get into management, there is career growth there in the field. When you do get into management, estimating, project management, project executive, or higher, you can very easily make $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 in your field. So it's not like working in the trades is a lifetime of servitude and slave labor and, backbreaking work that you're committing to forever. That being said, back to the toll that the industry takes on your body. It is not fair to look at somebody in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or even 70s or 80s and look at their life and their current health and the way that their body is responding to what they've done over the last few decades, and look at that and say, well, that is an accurate projection of what my life is going to look like, and my body and my health is going to look like if I start a career today in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. The reason is, well, there's several reasons. Number one, the industry has changed. Okay, it is not your grandfather's industry. There's better awareness for safety. There's better tools. There's better equipment. There's better laws and safety regulations and fines and incentives for people to perform better. Like I said, there's better equipment to save your knees and your back. We don't operate the way that we used to. So when you look at somebody, and somebody may say, oh, well, my grandfather just died because of XYZ, or my father is, in his 40s or 50s, and his back hurts and his knees hurt, or he had to retire early because he got hurt, or he coughs all the time, or has lung cancer, or whatever that may be. There are a lot of reasons why they were exposed to things, or they ended up with that hurdle in their life, or that cross to bear in their life, that you don't have to face the same things that they're facing. Give you one large example. The Twin Towers in New York, right? The Twin Towers that came down in 9/11. They were built in the early 70s. At that time, they had 60 deaths on that job site. 60 people died. Today, if one person dies on any job site of any size, that is considered to be an absolute catastrophe. Like game-changing, industry-changing experience for whatever company is in charge and responsible for that person dying. It is not the same. And just for perspective, that was in the 1970s. So if you have a grandfather today, they likely started their career in the 50s or 60s or 70s. They may have been in the industry for 10 to 15 years already in a situation where it was that common to die, right? That is not the situation that we are in today. And that's just one aspect. And what I want to do is I want to go through different regulations that have been put in place, different administrations that have been put in place, and go through different statistics, other statistics, a little more specific than that one job site, to show you how all of the safety measures and then basically the negative experiences that have happened to people and how people get hurt, how all of those have dropped as a result, and how that's going to continue to improve in the future. Now, on the flip side, not all aspects of somebody's health comes from their job, right? It is unfair to blame the construction industry and what they do every day on a job site for all aspects of their health. What do I mean by that? The industry is notorious, even today, for people not taking care of themselves. That doesn't have to be you, okay? Alcohol and drug use is 2 to 4 times what it is in that industry compared to outside. Now, the majority of people still don't struggle with those problems, but it's just more prevalent. So when you're looking at a construction worker and they've been smoking cigarettes their whole life and they drink 5 times a week and, they're overweight, because you're more apt to be overweight if you're in construction and you're drinking energy drinks and gas station candy and stuff like that. If that is how you're living your life, then your health isn't going to look good anyway, no matter what job you have. And it's better today than it was 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. When my father became an apprentice as a pipe fitter in Boston back in 1978, he was an apprentice from 1978 to 1973. The industry was totally different. When he went to get coffee as an apprentice for his whole crew, he was expected to come back with a case of beer every day on the job site. Come back with a case of beer 5 days a week. The guys were drinking on the job. Okay? Not only is that not safe, but it's not ideal for your health to drink every day and smoke cigarettes every day. So when you look and people say, oh, people struggle with heart disease or lung cancer or all of these things, yes, okay, for decades people were exposed to things on job sites that they shouldn't have, but they also didn't treat their body right either. So what people were exposed to both on and off the job site for the last 50 years is not a fair, and the result of that is not a fair projection for what your life has to look like entering a career in construction. Okay? Now, with that being said, let's talk about some specifics. What has specifically happened and what are the results over the last 50 years in construction? And again, I say 50 years because 50 years ago would have been around the time that your grandfather may have started the industry. So, very interesting. I made a post a few weeks ago, and it showed a bunch of guys on the Chrysler building as that was being built in New York City back in 1929. And nobody has fall protection. Nobody has any kind of safety measures going on. And what one of the most common comments was OSHA would never allow that. Where was OSHA? Well, back in 1929, OSHA didn't exist, right? OSHA being the Occupational Safety, Health and Safety and Health Administration, which basically creates rules and regulations and enforces those regulations on any employment, right? Any industry. And here's the funny thing about that. Again, OSHA didn't exist in 1929. OSHA didn't exist until 1970, meaning that your grandfather may have, again, been on a job site and been in construction for a decade or more prior to coming into the construction industry. So they didn't even have an administration to police these things or create these regulations or enforce those or force companies or penalize companies for putting people in negative situations or hazardous situations that could harm themselves in their short-term or long-term health, right? So and even when it did come about, it wasn't like somebody flipped a switch in 1970 and all of a sudden everything was safe, right? That they had to implement all of these regulations, and I'm going to go through a specific example in a moment where they just put in a significant regulation in there not even 10 years ago that affects people's health, right? So OSHA didn't even exist until 1970, right? Again, this is not your grandfather's industry. OSHA has had 55 years of action from your grandfather's industry to today to make things better. And I know not everybody likes OSHA or safety guys or anything like that, but it's important, and people should know that. So over the last 50 years, safety regulations are up. PPE is up. Both, what is PPE? That's personal protective equipment, gloves, glasses, hard hats, safety rails, all of these tying off to safety rails. And what do I mean by tying off? I mean when you're working on something high, that you have fall protection, that you don't fall down, right? You don't fall, and splat in the sidewalk or anything like that. All of those things are up. They're more available. People are aware of them. They're required on job sites. Insurance requirements are up if people want to maintain their insurance, which affects what? Affects their profitability. So companies are incentivized to make sure that people have safety regulations and they're implementing actual safety measures. And awareness and training is up. And as time keeps going forward, our awareness and our ability to spot dangerous situations is going to increase, right? AI is going to be able to detect in a schedule when you may have a potentially unsafe condition and make a recommendation on a method or procedure on how to do that work. Cameras can already detect unstable surfaces that need to be stabilized before people walk or people conduct work on them. So technology is only going to get better, and we're about to read through all of these stats, and it's important to keep in mind that these stats have all improved vastly over the last 50 years, and they're going to keep, the momentum's coming, and technology is getting better and better, so they're going to improve exponentially in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years throughout your career if you were to start today. What else happened in the 70s that's different than compared to today? How about asbestos? Everybody's heard of asbestos. It's like a radioactive material that nobody wants to be around, right? People were still using asbestos in the 1970s. They were actually still working with asbestos. So in your grandfather's industry, they were using asbestos and breathing it in and ingesting that day in and day out. And then even after that, through the 80s and 90s and 2000s and 2010s, what have we been doing? We've been remediating it. Every time we touch a building or we go into a space that has asbestos, we have to get rid of it. So it's almost rare. It's much more rare now to come across asbestos today than it was 21 years ago than when I came into the industry, because we've spent decades trying to get rid of it, right? So when you hear about mesothelioma or you hear about lung cancer or any sort of negative effects that people have on their bodies that have been in the industry for 30, 40, 50 years, a lot of it has to do with exposure to things like asbestos. And that's just not something that somebody young coming into the industry should have to expose themselves to going forward. And when they do, everybody is aware about how to protect yourself and mitigate that risk that may have on your body. For instance, you have to wear a mask. You can't have a beard. The mask has to be tight to your face. You have to have the proper respirator, for that, and it has to be disposed of in a specific way and contained. And there's methods and procedures to how to do that now that they just didn't have years ago, right? So that's one example. Give you a more recent example. Silica. What is silica? Silica is basically particles that you can find in concrete and concrete dust. So anytime you demolish something that has concrete dust, or you're pouring concrete and there's concrete dust flying around, or you have any sort of product that contains silica in it, and we know what those products are now, and anytime you use those products, there's typically a safety procedure and a method of installation procedure that has to go along with that. But everybody's aware of silica and silica mitigation and the importance of it now. Why is that important? Because it can cause things like lung cancer. I just had somebody in my comment section, and what did they say? They were like, oh, my grandfather died of lung cancer in his 70s, and his quality of life wasn't good before that. Okay, what was he exposed to? If it was something like silica and that caused his lung cancer, they did not impose regulations on silica until 2016. It hasn't even been 10 years since that has been spotted as an issue, and they've flagged it, and they've made requirements, and there are regulations, and there are methods of procedure in place to mitigate the effect or people's exposure to silica, not only on a job site, but in the neighboring areas around or adjacent to a job site. Not even 10 years. Okay, so just another thing that has been implemented recently in the last 10 years or in the last few decades, that going forward, if you were to start a career in the trades today, you don't have exposure to, or if you do, it is a much more mitigated risk, mitigated exposure to it. So the notion, again, with things like asbestos or silica, and these are just two examples, you can go through more, that somebody today in their 50s, 60s, and 70s can serve as a projection of what your life has to look like is just inaccurate. It is not fair. And you shouldn't let that sway you in your decision to come into this industry. Now let's go over some specific statistics. Overall fatalities. I mentioned that one job site being the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center in New York, 60 fatalities today. If one happened, that would be an absolute catastrophe. Overall fatalities in the industry in 1970, 18.5 deaths for every 100,000 workers, which, if we're being honest, that's relatively rare, but I wouldn't want to be exposed to that type of risk either. Now, it has basically been cut in half. As of 2020, that has dropped to 10.1. So 18.5 to 10.1 for every 100,000 workers. Over the last 50 years, the death rate in construction overall has been cut in half. Now, there's going to be a punchline to these safety statistics. I have two things that I'm going to, two caveats that I'm going to point out to all of these safety statistics. But 10.1 for every 100,000, that would basically be 1 in every 10,000 people would die or face a fatality in the construction industry. Fatalities due to fall incidents. The most serious severe injuries or deaths typically come from fall incidents. Used to be very common. In 1980, so 10 years later, only 45 years ago, it was 15.5 workers for every 100,000 workers would face a fall incident. In 2020, that is down to 3.5 out of every 100,000. So that has cut by 80%. 80% down, right? 15 down to 3, call it. So that's a huge jump. That's a huge jump. Again, fall protection's been put in place. We're much more careful about scaffolding and working on high surfaces. When I'm on a job site, and I'm not even what I would call like a super safety guy, you know, like I'm not like over the top with safety and enforcing everything. Even something as small as when somebody's working on a scissor lift, making sure that the chain is across basically the place where the cage, I would call it, where the person sits. Even just something as small as making sure that that chain is in place can save somebody from getting severely injured from a fall on a job site. So again, from 1980 to 2000, down 80%. How about serious injuries? Not just death, but serious injuries where somebody winds up in the hospital. Eventually 10.9 in 1992. So more relatively recently, 23 years ago, 10.9 out of every 100, not 100,000, but 10.9 out of every 100 workers would be headed to the hospital at some point. Today, that's down to 3.1 out of every 100. So in 23 years, again, that has been cut in half by almost 75%. Call it 75%. 11 basically down to 3. We'll call it about 75%. It's down to about 3/4. Electrical injuries. How often do they face electrical injuries on a job site? You know, being electrocuted or something like that. Back in 1990, so 35 years ago, that was 1.5 people out of every 100,000. So pretty rare. But what does that look like today? 0.5 out of every 100,000. So that has dropped by 2/3. Call that 66%. Struck by fatalities. That's, you know, some object flying through the air or something falling and landing on somebody's head or somebody getting crushed. 4.2 out of every 100,000 workers. In 1990. So 35 years ago, it was 4.2. Today, that is down to 1.5 in every 100,000 workers. So call that 2/3 again. Call that 66%. So just running through those numbers, overall fatalities been cut in half, down 50%. Fall incidents cut by 80%. Serious injuries resulting in hospitalization cut by 75%. Electrical injuries cut by 2/3, 66%, and then struck by fatalities cut again by 2/3, call it 66%. And here's the caveat that I will give you about injuries and when things happen on a job site. As somebody that's been around for, my third decade in the industry, been on the subcontractor side, been on the engineering side, been on the GC side, and now I'm touching more projects now than I ever have, up to, a few dozen at one time. Typically, when you hear about somebody getting hurt on a job site, whether it's cutting your hand or somebody ending up in the hospital, you listen to the story and they all end the same way. 9 out of 10 stories where somebody got hurt in a job site ends in the same sentence. What a fucking idiot. That's just me being honest. Usually, when somebody gets hurt in a job site, people look at it in retrospect and they're like, wow, that was stupid and uncalled for and really could have been prevented, whether it was by the manager or by the person in the field just doing something stupid. It shouldn't have happened. And that's just reality. I'm not saying that all people are stupid. I'm not saying that people don't get hurt by other people or, that it's always their fault. But 9 times out of 10, when I hear a story about somebody getting hurt on a job site, it's, wow, that was stupid. What a fucking idiot. And pardon my French, but I think if you asked anybody in the construction industry if they would agree with that, I'm pretty confident that they're going to agree with that sentiment. So what does that mean for you? That means that just because, even though these statistics are rare, people do get hurt in construction, that doesn't have to be you. It is not the industry that it used to be. You don't have to work in an unsafe scenario or situation. You can say no, and people do say no to working in unsafe circumstances. And honestly, today, when 99 times out of 100, if you bring it up to an employer that you don't feel comfortable or you feel like it's unsafe for you to be in a certain situation, they will accommodate you. Because if you do get hurt after, or somebody does get hurt after it was brought to their attention, the repercussions are 10 times worse. The second caveat that I have to these statistics, it is questionable sometimes when somebody reports an injury, how valid that claim is. I'm not saying everybody lies. I'm not saying that, people are crying, everyone cries wolf, or that all injuries are bullshit. But for instance, right now there is a large investigation in New York City being conducted across all job sites for fraud, that people are claiming injuries, and it's coordinated with everybody from the lawyers to the doctors to everybody. The thing runs deep. So even though these statistics are decreasing and the numbers are relatively rare, it is worth questioning how valid those numbers are and whether or not those are inflated for people trying to get a payday from claiming that they were injured on a job site when they actually were not. It's worth the question, right? So something to think about and something to consider when you think about the prevalence of getting injured on a job site, and again, maintaining your long-term health. So that being said, I also want to flip it. I also want to look at the lifestyle for somebody in an office job, comfortable in air conditioning, maybe an accountant, maybe somebody in marketing or something like that, and talk about the health risks of living that lifestyle. Because as somebody that's in their 30s now, and I talk to a lot of dads and other people in my neighborhood and things like that, and there are a lot of people that don't work out and they don't work with their hands. They're sedentary, what we call sedentary in their job. And what does sedentary mean? That means that you spend a lot of the time sitting still or not moving, and yet they have shoulder injuries or lower back injuries, or they have cardiovascular problems. Why? If the notion is that people in construction are the only people that get beat up at their job, then why can't other people outside of the construction industry maintain their health? Well, there's very good reason for that. So living a sedentary lifestyle also has its drawbacks, inclusive of the following: obesity, and this isn't me being mean, but 70 to 75% of America right now is obese. That's not subjective. It is a very objective thing that you can calculate. I also can see it with my eyes when I go somewhere like the airport or the mall. Everybody's fat. Okay? The reality is that 8 out of the top 10 leading causes of death are related to obesity. Again, and this is tied to being sedentary all day. Cardiovascular disease, right? Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, musculoskeletal problems. Here's what a lot of people don't understand about sitting down all day, going from your bed to sitting down to have breakfast, then sitting in a car to go to work, then sitting down at your desk, then sitting in a car to come home, then having dinner, and sitting down and watching TV. If you spend 99% of your time sitting down and you're only walking in between opportunities to sit down, you will face musculoskeletal problems, right? Prolonged sitting can lead to poor posture. It can lead to back pain. It can lead to disorders for all of your spines and joints, the same way that it will affect you if you're working with your body. Now, if you're obese and you have cardiovascular disease and you also can't sleep, right? Lack of physical activity during the day will inhibit your ability to sleep. What does that ultimately result in? Mental health issues. Sedentary lifestyles are associated with higher rates of anxiety, depression, stress. Physical activity improves mental well-being. There are studies out there that suggest that people that work with their hands are happier overall. So if you're working with your hands and you're not overindulging in food, eating the wrong food, and you're not excessively drinking, and you're not smoking, and you're not exposing yourself to all the things that people were exposed to 50 years ago on a job site, there is actually evidence to suggest that you will be healthier, happier, and maybe even wealthier working in construction. Actually, my suggestion is that you will be wealthier working in construction. You can have decreased bone health. Lack of body weight bearing activity can decrease your bone density, leading to fractures, meaning that you can break, you become more fragile. So with all of those being said, I mean, it leads to increased mortality risk. You have cognitive decline. Like if you don't use it, you'll lose it. Metabolic syndrome, which leads to being obese and all of the other things that we already said, poor sleep quality. So listen, these are just, if you Google the top risks with living a sedentary lifestyle, all of those things will come up. Don't believe me, go look it up yourself. But the notion that you are going to live a longer, happier, healthier, and wealthier life just because you have an office job is asinine. It is foolish. And again, I'll repeat myself. I'm not saying that you can't get hurt in construction. You can. But it's not near the risk that it used to be. The effect on your short-term and long-term health, the effect on your short-term and long-term health is not what it used to be. So looking at somebody today, looking at your father or your grandfather, and assuming that the result of their health at that point in their life is a projection of where you will be as a result of working in a trade is also asinine. It is foolish. It is not fair. And it is deterring you from what could be the greatest opportunity of your life to create that lifestyle that you want to live, the house you want to live in, the car you want to drive, where you want your kids to go to school, whether or not you work from home, whether or not you sit in an office all day, or maybe you want to work with your hands and then grow into a position where you're driving from job site to job site, running manpower, and you're in jeans and maybe a polo, but you're not necessarily working with your hands and you're not in an office either, right? You're somewhere in between. There's a huge draw for people to live a lifestyle like that and to work and that have a work style like that. And the only industry where that's available is really the construction industry or the trade industry. So moral of the story being, for all of the people that have these comments in my comment section suggesting that construction is a lifetime commitment to a servitude of slave labor that will break your back and take the cartilage out of your knees and give you knee pain your entire life and make you get a hip replacement when you're older, there is no reason to think that that is going to be the case for you any more than it would be if you were living a sedentary lifestyle working in an office. And that's just reality. At least in construction, there is evidence to show that you will have a better mental health available to you for working with your hands, having that knowledge and being able to bring that knowledge home and maintain your own home, by the way. But you will also be able to build a healthier and wealthier lifestyle for yourself and tailor whatever kind of work-life balance or work lifestyle you want for you and for your family. So I encourage you to go follow up on OSHA's website and get on Google and get on ChatGPT and check my numbers for everything that I've shared here today. Ultimately, I am always here to tell the truth. I am here to make sure that people are aware of opportunities that are out there for them and to make sure that they have an accurate perception of what they're getting themselves into by getting into this industry or getting into a trade, and what their opportunities are from the first time that they're in the industry, when they break through the door and they get that first opportunity, what the next step could be, to the side, left, right, up, down, whatever that may look like, and whatever they can make in their career. So the truth is always something you're going to hear from me. That being said, I appreciate everybody for listening. If you're still hanging on, I went over way more time than I thought that I wanted to. Again, go check out me at The Construction Mentor on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Go check out the link in my bio. And if you want any of these courses, or if you want to evaluate what a starting salary looks like for a college tuition versus trade school, or versus just going right into the trade, or getting a course career certificate through one of the links in my bio, and what a starting salary looks like from that, make sure you go to constructionmentor.org. You can also schedule a time with me at constructionmentor.org if you want to spend an hour and just talk about the different career opportunities that are there for you. I'm here to serve, and I'll see you next time.